Hi there, this is Lauren Kimball for ANI 245, and in this brief tutorial, I'm going to show you how to take a batch rendered image sequence out of Maya and bring it into a software where you can compile and export an animation. So for this particular demo, I'm going to be using Premiere Pro and I'm going to be using Toonboom Harmony. And the reason is because different students have different accessibility to different software, yada yada yada. I'm going to show you how to do it in both. All right, so to begin with, I've got this little Mary animation, the Mary rig, which many of you are familiar with from online, and I have the beginning of a lip sync demo that I was giving much earlier. So it's very, very basic, but it'll work to serve the purpose of this tutorial. In the background, I have a simple Arnold sky dome just to throw some light in. This tutorial is not about how to set up your lights. It is simply about the batch render. So we've got a quick animation, we've got some lights, we're ready to render. I'm going to go up here and click on this little clapboard with a gear right next to the hyper shade button. This is your render settings. And in your render settings, you're going to want to go ahead and make sure that the path for your render is where you think it's going. So when you first open up your assignment, you should always check to make sure you've set your project. As you can see, the path for where the export is going to go into my desktop, under my exercise 4 assignment, and into the images folder. All right, if you do not set your project, there's a chance that it's going to end up in the default directory that Maya usually throws things into. If you don't remember how to set your project, it's File, Set Project, choose that folder, and press Set. All right, so I've confirmed right here at the top that it's going exactly where I want it to go. Next, File Output. I'm just going to name this Frame, just to keep life easy. Image format, EXR is fine. I'm going to change this to PNG because I'm going to be exporting this and bringing it into Toonboom. I want to make sure that these images are going to work in Toonboom. I don't know if Toonboom takes EXR. All right, so I'm going to scroll down and frame animation ext, what extension, file name I'm going to be using. For a single frame, it's just going to be name the extension. So up here you can see file name, frame, PNG. I'm going to click on this and I'm going to scroll down to name_number.ext. Now, a lot of things change with that. First off, you'll see that there is a file name all the way to file name, meaning there's a start frame and an end frame here. And you'll notice there's a frame padding option, which means how many zeros are going to go in here. By default, I like to set things to about 4 and just leave it alone, never mess with it again. That way there's virtually always enough frames, unless you have an animation that's going over 1,000 frames, in which case you might want to bring the frame padding up to 5. This just ensures that if you have frame 1 and then you have frame 10 and there's no zeros, it might import weirdly into a software like Premiere when you import the sequence. So just always have frame paddings, always have a certain number of zeros, whether it be 3 or 4 in front of your numbers. I'll just leave it as 3 for now. All right, I'm going to scroll down a little bit. Frame range. I'm going to go ahead and start my animation on frame 1, and this animation goes all the way to frame 24. So I'm going to go ahead and type in 24. By frame 1, good. A renderable camera. I'm going to change this to whatever camera I'm using. So if you look down here, it says face cam. So I'm going to make sure that it renders face cam. This is very important. If you are using something other than the perspective camera, which you should be using something other than the perspective camera to render, then you want to make sure that it's set here in the preferences. Otherwise, it will go to the default and render from a completely different view than what you intended. If you are following along with me and you're rendering a PNG format, turn off the alpha channel mask. Otherwise, there'll be some transparency baked in. Down here under image size, I'm going to change this from HD 540 and I'm going to bounce it to HD 720. Now, for my class, I recommend HD 720 or 1080. They're both the same 16:9 aspect ratio, but one of them is going to be a little smaller, so a little less render time. So that's why I'm going to choose HD 720, but 1080 is just fine as well. Okay? Now, of course, after this, you're going to want to make sure that you have the right Arnold render settings, but we're not going to go into that. That's not what this tutorial is about. There is a text document on Canvas for my students that goes over all the render settings that I recommend for your animation. Okay? All right, so I'm going to close out of this, and once I'm ready and I have my render settings set, I'm going to hold down spacebar. I'm going to go to render, and I'm just going to activate the batch render. Now, I'm not going to do that because I've already done that, but if I had done it, if I hadn't pre-rendered before the tutorial started recording, I could click down here on this window. If you see in the bottom right hand corner, this little semicolon, this opens up your script editor. And as you can see by scrolling up, and I can see the history of commands that I've run, this shows you the percentage done of each frame's render. So you're able to actually watch the render as it's happening, and you'll be able to see when a render corrupts, if it corrupts. So for some people, I've talked about this in class, but I'll touch on it again here. It's always best practice to render an image sequence as opposed to a video file, because if something goes awry, then you can pick up wherever the frame's corrupted and you don't lose all the previous render data that you've done. So that's why image sequences are awesome. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to open up my exercise 5 folder. And in here, I see that there are the 24 frames that I wanted inside my images folder. Awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and begin with Premiere Pro. Open up Premiere Pro, and I'm going to click New Project. When you open up the New Project window, they ask you, hey, what media do you want to launch? What name do you want to make? Blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to select any media. I'm just going to go up here to Project Name, and I'm going to name this Exercise 5. Or, yeah, that'll work, because this lip sync was part of the Exercise 5 assignment. Project location is typically going to be where the Premiere Pro files go, but I'm going to set it to my desktop just so that I can easily find this file again. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click Create, and that will open up a brand new workspace inside Premiere Pro. There are 5 default windows here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This first one shows you the source clips. So down here in this bottom left-hand corner window, this is your project bin. This is where all the media resources that you're going to bring into Premiere Pro go. If I click on any of them, I can preview what they are, whether it's an audio, an image, or a video, and that preview will show up here. Now, one other thing I note is that there are these tabs behind the main feature. So the main feature of this window is the source clip, showing you a preview of whatever you're selecting. There's also effects controls, audio controls, metadata, so just be aware there are other tabs. We're not going to go into all of these things. This is just a super cursory tutorial. I'm just letting you know there's other tabs everywhere. I'm giving you the general of what these windows are for. So source clip over here, this is going to show you the timeline view. So when you have an animation in here, which is your timeline, can't see the timeline because we haven't created a sequence yet. But when we do, you're going to be able to watch them in this window up here. In the middle, we have our toolbar and, of course, the project bin. Okay, so to get started, I'm going to just double-click here. And because I ran through this earlier for my students, you can see that I'm already in the sound folder of my exercise 5. Let's go back to exercise 5, and I'm going to click on images. All right, perfect. So there are the 24 frames from my animation. I'm going to click on frame 1. I'm going to go to show options, and I'm going to click on image sequence. So when I click on image sequence, it's going to look at this and see every frame number that comes after it that matches this. So if it says frame 1, it's going to keep going until there's a break in the numbers or they come to an end. So there's no break in these numbers. It's going to stop at 24, image sequence, import. And here we can see that it has created a video clip based on those images. If I double click this, you can see the video clip up here. I can press play. I can see that really simple lip sync started there. All right, right here it says frame rate is 24 frames per second. Perfect, that's exactly what I want. Yeah, that's everything. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to click it and drag it over here to the new icon and let go. And it's going to immediately create a sequence based on the parameters of the video clip. So now when I press play, it's playing the same clip, only it's in the timeline. All right, so now I want to go ahead and bring in my audio. So I'm going to double click the bin again. I'm going to close the image folder, go to exercise 5 and click on sound. And there's the audio clip. that we used for the demo. I'm going to import it, and I'm going to drag and drop it over here to my audio. Now, I didn't animate the whole clip, so I'm going to go here to where it ends, and I'm going to press C. When I click C, it activates the cut tool or the razor tool. I'm going to go ahead and click right there. It cuts my audio. Click V, V like violin, and you're able to use the select tool again. So I'm going to click this part that I don't need and just delete it. So now I've got the audio and the animation together, and I can press play.
But I do what?
Now, of course, I can go in here and I can cut a couple frames and move the audio backward if I want to offset my audio, or I could click this and drag it forward a couple frames if I want to offset it forward. As many of you know, offsetting the audio can help it hit a little bit better. So just be aware that I showed you how to offset this in Maya in class. I'm showing you can go back and offset it again in Premiere just by moving this audio where you want it. You can also go up here, because right now it's playing by seconds. I can right click and change it to frames so you know how many frames you're moving forward and back in your animation. Alright, so now I am ready to export. And to export, I'm going to go File, Export, Media. And in the export media, I see my file name. So I'm going to name this based on the convention of the assignment, which would be last name underscore ANI 245 underscore EX5. This tutorial is technically for a project, but that's okay. This lip sync was for exercise 5. All right, location, it's going to land on my desktop. The preset is going to match source. That's fine. Format H.264, which means that the final export is probably going to be an, yep, there it is, MP4. Now, you can also export as a different file format. You could use QuickTime, for instance, if you prefer. That's fine. There's also other presets you can check out, but match source is fine. So then I'm just going to go ahead and click Export, and then minimize Premiere and test my clip. Get rid of this. So there is my Premiere Pro icon. So this is my file for going back into Premiere Pro if I ever want it. This is my preview file, so this is like a little render that's kicked out of Premiere Pro for Premiere Pro to use, so it references. And then this is the video clip.
But I do what?
Okay, cool. So now I'm going to show you how to use Toonboom. And the reason I bother to show two different software packages is, again, affordability. Not everybody has a Premiere Pro license. If you don't have Premiere Pro, you certainly could download it for the free trial for 7 days. But if you've used up that trial, you can always go to Toonboom Harmony. They've got a 30-day trial. Or if you need to buy an education license, it's like $6 a month. And there's no strings attached, which Adobe is famous for. All right, so I'm going to go in and I'm just going to name this, same name, Exercise 5. And I'm going to set this to the desktop, and we'll go the same camera size. And I'm going to create scene. Scene folder exists. Oh, whoops, sorry. I'll just call it 2. Exercise 5 underscore 2. All right, give it the little pinwheel of doom. There we go. Now we're inside of Toonboom. I'm going to go ahead and reset my workspace. Go away. There we go. Restore default workspace so that my Toonboom looks like your Toonboom. There we go. All right, so this is the default workspace of Toonboom. I'm going to go down here, see the little light bulb in the bottom left-hand corner. I'm going to go over 2 icons and click on the camera mask. That way I can see exactly where my export area is going to be on my stage. Now I'm going to go and click on File, Import Movie. I'm already set to the image folder in Exercise 5. I'm going to click on, oh, sorry, silly me. I meant File, Import Images. All right, browse. All right, so unlike Premiere, you're not going to be able to just click on the first frame and click Image Sequence. Instead, highlight everything. Hold down Shift, highlight what's remaining. So grab all 24 frames and click Open. It's going to take those mini files selected, as they say, and create a layer to put it on. So I'm going to call this my animation layer. And I'm going to make sure to vectorize it. And the reason I want to vectorize it is because if I don't vectorize it, it doesn't always stretch to the full 720 aspect ratio for some odd reason. So I'm just going to click on Vectorize, Color, and press OK. And there we go. So the reason it looks a little faded is because inside of Toonboom I have this thing called the light box, and the light box allows you to see through, or light table, sorry. Light table allows you to see through different drawing layers, and as you can see, I'm not on the animation layer I created. If I click on the animation layer, it's bright. If I click on the drawing layer, it's a little faded. So I can get rid of this drawing layer. It's there by default. To get rid of it, click it and just click on the minus sign, and it will go away. And when I press play, there's my animation. So I'm going to click on the last frame here, which is frame 24, and you see this red little bookend type upside down L. This controls my timeline, like the, well, not my timeline, but the exported area of the timeline. So I'm going to click it and drag it all the way to where my frames end, press play. There we go. So that's all that's going to be exported. Now I need the sound. So I'm going to go File, Import Sound. Go to my exercise 5, click on the sound, and I'm going to open. And there we see the sound. Now by default, these little icons here, you got play, play render, loop, and you got these two audio icons. They're off by default. If I press play, even though the wave is there, I clearly can't hear anything. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and it allows me to hear the audio. So just remember, if you're playing this and you can't hear the audio, nothing's broken. It's just Toonboom turns this off by default. So this is the sound preview, and this is for scrubbing. All right, so regarding offset, if you want to offset the audio, I recommend just going over here, clicking on the plus sign, and clicking on your X sheet. Your X sheet, for those of you who haven't used Toonboom before, this imitates the traditional animator's X sheet, which is how you used to organize your layers of paper animation for a multi-pane camera. So I'm just going to click on these columns basically represent the layers. And this represents the animation layer, and this represents the audio layer. So if I want to offset this, I can shift click two of these frames, because me personally, I like to offset by having the audio play a little sooner on my lip sync. So I would just delete those first two frames. It's going to say, hey, do you want to pull the following sequence up? Yes. As you can see, the audio scoots back a little.
But I don't want to.
And it just feels like it hits better when you offset the audio ever so slightly. All right, so I've got my animation ready to go. I got the frames, I've got the audio, I'm ready to export. File, export, movie. The video format is going to be different based on what you're using. If you're on PC or Mac, I'm on Mac, so I'm going to be exporting as a QuickTime, but you could also export as an AVI, whatever you want. Output file, I'm going to set this to my desktop, and I'm going to go ahead and call this, last name underscore ni245 underscore ex5, since this demo is from that assignment, and save. Frames 1 to 24. You can also do all. If you set this little red marker, you can just set it to all. But if you don't, if you still have it stretched to 60, you can also go to frames and say very specifically where you want it to export from. Same scene resolution. You don't really need to mess with these options. You just press OK. And there we go. Now when I go to my desktop, I have two video files. This first one came from Premiere Pro.
But I don't want to.
And this one came from Toonboom.
But I don't want to.
So 2 ways of putting your image sequence together. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Have an awesome evening.